Thea Holloway's life was about as ordinary as they came. She lived in Red Ridge, a dusty, sun-baked town with one diner, one grocery store, and miles of flat, empty desert surrounding it. But while her friends daydreamed of city life or hanging out at the lake, Thea's eyes were always turned upward, watching the stars. She'd lie on the roof of her house most nights with her telescope, tracing constellations and imagining entire galaxies of adventure. But even Thea could never have imagined that one of those adventures would find her. One Friday, Thea's science teacher, Mr. Blevins, organized a field trip to explore Red Ridge Canyon, a craggy, winding landscape of red rock cliffs just outside of town. The canyon was famous for its odd, spiraled rock formations and its so-called whispering caves, which were said to amplify the smallest sounds into eerie, echoing whispers. Some of the town kids even believed the caves were haunted. Thea rolled her eyes whenever she heard that, though she couldn't deny there was something otherworldly about the place. As her class set out along the dusty trails, Thea felt the weight of her backpack, a gift from her mom, bouncing against her shoulders, loaded with notebooks, pens, and the camera she brought to capture anything interesting. Her best friend, Maggie, lagged behind, complaining about the heat. "It's roasting, Thea. How are you even interested in this stuff?" Maggie grumbled, wiping her forehead. "Come on, it's not every day we get out of school and get to wander around a cool place like this," Thea replied, scanning the rock faces and ledges. She didn't mention that her heart was racing with excitement. For years, she'd been hoping to find something amazing in this canyon, though she couldn't quite explain why. Something about the whispers she'd heard as a child and the strange carvings she'd read about in old town records made her feel like Red Ridge Canyon held more secrets than anyone realized. They were nearing the Whispering Caves when Thea spotted a narrow path leading off to the side, half hidden by a cluster of cacti. She glanced at her classmates, who were busy staring at a small scorpion scuttling across the trail. "Maggie," she whispered, tugging on her friend's sleeve, "let's check that path over there." "Are you nuts?" "Mr. Blevins will flip if he catches us wandering off," Maggie said, though her curiosity was clearly piqued. "Just a quick look." "I'll be right back," Thea promised, slipping away before Maggie could argue. The path was steep and winding, and Thea had to push aside thorny bushes and duck under low-hanging branches. But as she descended, the air grew cooler, and a faint shimmering caught her eye through the shadows. At the end of the path, tucked into a hollow in the rocks, was a small cave entrance. Her heart pounded as she stepped inside, her footsteps crunching softly on the sandy floor. She shone her flashlight around the dim cave, noticing strange, jagged symbols etched into the walls, glowing faintly with a greenish hue. She moved deeper into the cave until her flashlight illuminated something half buried in the sand. It looked like a bow, but not one she'd ever seen before. The bow was sleek, a silvery metal with swirling patterns that pulsed with a soft, green light. She knelt down, brushing off the sand with trembling fingers. The bow seemed ancient yet impossibly advanced, its smooth surface somehow both alien and familiar. As her fingers traced the strange symbols carved into it, she felt a warmth spread through her hand, up her arm, and across her whole body. Her skin prickled, her senses sharpened, and for a brief, dizzying moment, she felt seen by something far beyond herself. Suddenly, the bow's surface lit up, and a faint hum filled the cave. She stumbled back, but the bow stayed lit, casting an eerie green glow on the cave walls. An image flickered before her eyes, a holographic projection of a tall, armored figure, with skin the color of molten silver and eyes glowing with violet fire. "Greetings, warrior," the figure said in a deep, resonant voice that echoed in her mind as much as her ears. "You have been chosen by the Eldarii bow, a weapon of protection forged by my people, the Eldarii, to defend against the darkness of the universe." Thea's heart pounded as she tried to process what was happening. She was just a girl from Red Ridge, standing in a dusty cave, yet here was an alien projection speaking directly to her, calling her a warrior and explaining that she had been chosen. The bow has waited eons for a worthy bearer, the projection continued, its eyes boring into hers with an intensity that felt almost like a challenge. With it, you hold the power to protect, to defend. But know this, those who seek the bow's power will come for you. Be vigilant. And with that, the figure vanished, leaving only the glowing bow in her hands. Thea's breath came in short gasps. The weight of the bow was comforting, steady, as though it were grounding her in the face of all that mystery. She felt the same sensation she had just moments ago, the pulse of something powerful, ancient, and alive. She knew she couldn't leave it there, not after that message. Without fully understanding why, she slung the bow over her shoulder, and it fit perfectly, like it belonged there. As she exited the cave, still feeling the strange hum of the bow, she knew that her life would never be the same. Thea's mind was a whirlwind as she made her way back home, the mysterious bow concealed beneath a blanket in her backpack. Every few steps, she glanced over her shoulder, half expecting someone or something to be following her. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Red Ridge, but the streets remained quiet, with only the occasional tumbleweed rolling by. As she approached her house, a modest two-story structure with peeling paint and a creaky porch, Thea took a deep breath to steady herself. She needed to act normal. Pushing open the front door, she was greeted by the familiar scent of her mom's cooking tonight. It was chili, her favorite. "Hey, sweetie. How was the field trip?" her mom called from the kitchen. "Educational," Thea replied, forcing a casual tone. "We saw some interesting rock formations." "Glad to hear it. Dinner will be ready in about an hour." "Great, I'm just going to go up to my room for a bit." She bounded up the stairs 2 at a time, the weight of the bow pressing against her back like a secret itching to be revealed. Once inside her room, she locked the door and pulled the blinds. Her heart pounded as she carefully unwrapped the bow and laid it on her bed. In the soft glow of her bedside lamp, the bow looked even more otherworldly. The silvery metal seemed to absorb and refract the light, and the strange symbols along its length pulsed faintly with a greenish hue. "What are you?" she whispered, running her fingers over the cool metal. As if in response, the bow emitted a soft hum. Startled, Thea jerked her hand back. The symbols began to glow brighter, and suddenly, a holographic display projected into the air above the bow. Strange glyphs and patterns floated before her eyes, shifting and rearranging themselves. Initializing language protocols, a melodic voice announced. The glyphs transformed into words she could understand. "Greetings, warrior. You have been chosen by the Eldarii bow, a weapon forged by the ancient protectors of the galaxy." Thea's eyes widened. "Chosen? Me?" "The Eldarii crafted this bow to defend against the encroaching darkness. It has lain dormant, awaiting one worthy of its power." She sat down hard on the edge of her bed. "This can't be real. I'm just a girl from Red Ridge. Your origin is of no consequence. Worthiness is determined by the purity of heart and strength of spirit." The hologram shifted, displaying images of distant galaxies, shimmering nebulae, and colossal starships engaged in battle with shadowy figures. "Wait," Thea said, holding up her hand. "What darkness? What am I supposed to defend against?" "Evil forces have long sought the power of the Eldarii. With the bow reactivated, they will come." Her stomach twisted. "Come here? To Earth?" "Affirmative. Preparations must begin." She shook her head, trying to process the information. "This is insane. How am I supposed to fight, whatever that is?" "Training protocols are available. Do you wish to commence?" Thea hesitated. Part of her wanted to throw the bow back into the cave where she'd found it and forget this ever happened. But another part, a stronger, more curious part, felt a thrill at the thought of wielding such power. "Yes," she finally said. "Begin training. Training will commence when you are ready. For now, familiarize yourself with the bow's basic functions." She reached out and picked up the bow. It felt lighter now, as if it were an extension of her own body. Standing in the center of her room, she held it up and pulled back on the string. To her amazement, a shaft of green energy materialized, forming an arrow made of pure light. Whoa, she breathed. She released the string, and the energy arrow shot forward, embedding itself in the wall with a soft thud before dissipating. A small scorch mark remained. "Oh no," she whispered, rushing over to inspect the damage. "Mom is going to kill me." Just then, there was a knock on her door. "Thea? Everything okay in there?" her mom asked. Yeah. I just tripped." "Dropped a book," Thea lied, her heart racing. "All right. Dinner's almost ready. Be down in a minute." She waited until she heard her mom's footsteps recede before exhaling in relief. She needed a place where she could practice without worrying about causing property damage or being interrupted. An idea struck her. The old barn at the edge of their property had been abandoned for years. It was secluded and spacious, the perfect spot. After a quick dinner filled with one-word answers to her mom's questions, Thea grabbed a flashlight and slipped out the back door. The sun had set, and the stars dotted the night sky like scattered diamonds. The air was cool, and the only sounds were the distant hoot of an owl and the crunch of her boots on dry grass. The barn loomed ahead, its wooden frame weathered and covered in ivy. She pushed open the creaky door and stepped inside. Moonlight filtered through the gaps in the roof, casting eerie patterns on the dusty floor. "All right," she said, gripping the bow. "Let's try this again." She pulled back the string, and the energy arrow formed once more. Aiming at an old hay bale, she released. The arrow flew straight and true, hitting the target and causing a small explosion of light. A surge of excitement coursed through her. She tried again, this time aiming at a rusted tractor part. The arrow shattered it into pieces. "This is incredible," she said, a grin spreading across her face. Suddenly, the bow vibrated in her hands. The holographic display reappeared. "Alert, foreign entity detected," the voice announced. Thea's smile faded. "What does that mean?" Before she could react, a faint buzzing sound filled the air. She spun around to see a small, metallic orb hovering near the barn's entrance. It was about the size of a soccer ball, with a smooth surface that reflected the ambient light. A red lens in the center glowed ominously. "Nyrax scout drone identified," the bow informed her. "Nyrax? Is that an alien?" "Correct. The Nyrax Dominion seeks Eldarii technology. Defensive action recommended." The drone emitted a sharp beep and started to advance toward her, a beam of red light scanning the area. Panic surged through Thea. "Defensive action? I don't know how to fight this thing." "Trust in the bow. Let your instincts guide you." The drone's red light intensified, and a small aperture opened on its side, revealing a pulsating energy core. "Energy weapon detected. Evasive maneuvers advised." Thea didn't need to be told twice. She dove behind a stack of wooden crates just as a bolt of red energy sizzled past her, scorching the ground where she'd been standing. Okay, she muttered, her heart hammering. "Focus, Thea. You can do this." She peeked out from behind the crates. The drone was scanning the area, its movements precise and mechanical. Drawing a deep breath, she stood up and pulled back the bowstring. The energy arrow formed, brighter this time, crackling with power. She aimed and released. The arrow streaked toward the drone, but at the last moment, the machine darted to the side with lightning speed. The arrow missed, exploding harmlessly against the barn wall. "Target possesses high agility," the bow's voice noted. "Adjust your approach." "How am I supposed to hit it if it keeps dodging?" Thea exclaimed, ducking as another energy bolt flew overhead. "Utilize predictive targeting. Anticipate the target's movements." She clenched her jaw. Easier said than done. Closing her eyes for a moment, she tried to steady her breathing. She remembered how the bow seemed to respond to her thoughts, how the arrows felt like extensions of herself. "All right," she whispered, opening her eyes. "Let's try this again." She stood up, drawing the bowstring back slowly. This time, she focused not just on the drone's current position but where it might move next. She felt a connection forming, a thread of intent between her and the arrow. She released. The arrow curved in midair, arcing gracefully toward the drone. The machine attempted to dodge, but the arrow adjusted its path, striking the drone squarely. A brilliant flash erupted, and the drone disintegrated into a shower of sparks and metal fragments. "Target neutralized," the bow confirmed. Thea lowered the bow, her hand shaking. I did it. Your actions were effective. However, more will come." She sank to the floor, the reality of the situation crashing down on her. "This is real. This is actually happening." "Affirmative. The Nyrax Dominion will continue to pursue the bow. Training is imperative." She looked up at the holographic display, determination hardening her features. "Then let's train. I need to be ready." Initializing advanced training protocols. The barn transformed around her. The dusty floor and old equipment faded away, replaced by a virtual landscape of alien terrain dotted with obstacles and moving targets. "Welcome to the Eldarii Training Arena," the voice announced. "Here, you will hone your skills and prepare for the challenges ahead." Thea took a deep breath, gripping the bow tightly. "Bring it on." She spent hours in the simulation, learning to navigate complex environments, improve her aim, and utilize the bow's various functions. She discovered she could create energy shields, generate multiple arrows at once, and even manipulate the arrows' trajectories with her mind. Exhaustion began to set in, but she pushed through, driven by a newfound sense of purpose. By the time the training session concluded, dawn was breaking outside, golden light seeping through the cracks in the barn walls. "Training complete for now," the bow informed her. "Rest is recommended." She nodded wearily. "Agreed." As she stepped out of the barn, the cool morning air greeted her. The horizon was painted with hues of pink and orange, and birds chirped softly in the distance. Thea gazed out over the open fields, the weight of the bow comforting against her back. She knew her life had irrevocably changed, thrusting her into a reality filled with dangers she could barely comprehend. But beneath the layers of fear and uncertainty, there was excitement, a thrill that she'd been chosen for something extraordinary. "Looks like my adventure is just beginning," she murmured. With renewed determination, she headed back toward the house, ready to face whatever challenges awaited her. The following days unfolded like a waking dream. By day, Thea went to school, went through the motions, and tried to keep up the appearance of a normal 14-year-old. But by night, she became something else entirely. She would sneak out of the house once her mom was asleep, making her way to the old barn where the Eldarii bow waited. There, under the starlit sky, she trained. Her nightly training sessions transported her to alien landscapes and holographic simulations created by the bow. Sometimes she found herself in sprawling, metallic cities with towering alien buildings. Other times, she practiced in dense, glowing forests under alien suns. The bow's holographic training arena adjusted to her skill level, introducing new challenges each night, moving targets, shifting terrain, and even enemy constructs that attacked with startling speed and precision. Thea's skills grew rapidly. The Eldarii bow was more than just a weapon, it was a guide, a teacher. She learned to rely on her instincts, to focus her energy, and to move with precision and agility. The bow's voice, which she had come to think of as the mentor, encouraged her to push her limits each night. One evening, after hours of training, Thea sat on a bale of hay, catching her breath. She'd just completed a particularly grueling series of tests that involved leaping across wide chasms and firing energy arrows midair. Her body ached, her muscles were burning, but she felt exhilarated. Training progress, significant, the mentor noted, projecting a series of symbols in the air. You have achieved level 3 proficiency with basic Eldarii weaponry techniques. Level 3? How many levels are there? Thea asked, wiping sweat from her forehead. Unknown. The bow adapts to the wielder's growth and creates new levels as necessary. There is no ceiling. Thea let out a low whistle. You mean this will just keep getting harder? Correct. However, your rate of progress is promising. She couldn't help but smile at the hint of praise. Despite the strangeness of her situation, she felt an odd sense of purpose and belonging that she'd never experienced before. But even with her progress, Thea had a nagging feeling that she'd barely scratched the surface of the bow's power. One night, as Thea was practicing a new technique creating multiple energy arrows simultaneously, she noticed a strange light glowing from a pocket in her backpack. She carefully set down the bow and pulled out her phone, squinting at the screen. A notification blinked, but it wasn't from any app she recognized. Incoming transmission, Nyrax communication intercepted. Thea tapped the notification, and a crackling, distorted voice filled the air. She froze, staring at the screen as the voice hissed in broken English. Human. Bearer. Identified. Location. Earth. Subject, Holloway, Thea. Her blood turned to ice. Coordinates acquired. Commencing retrieval operation. The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving Thea in stunned silence. The Nyrax Dominion had not only detected her, they knew who she was, where she lived, and they were on their way. The mentor's voice broke the silence. It was only a matter of time before the Nyrax located you. Their forces will arrive within hours. Thea's pulse raced. They're coming here? To my town? Affirmative. Your training has been sufficient to defend yourself, but you must be prepared to protect others as well. She felt a knot of fear twist in her stomach. Her mom. Her friends. The whole town, they were all in danger, and none of them had any idea what was coming. What do I do? She whispered, gripping the bow so tightly her knuckles turned white. Trust in your training, the mentor replied. And remember, the Eldarii bow is more than a weapon. It is a tool of protection, designed to adapt to the wielder's will. Focus, and let it guide you. Thea took a deep breath, forcing herself to stay calm. She had to act, and fast. But first, she needed to make sure her mom was safe. Thea hurried home, slipping quietly into her mom's room. Her mom was fast asleep, her breathing soft and steady. Thea gently placed a note on the nightstand. Mom, something important came up, and I have to leave town for a while. Please trust me and stay safe. I'll explain everything when I get back. Love, Thea. Her heart ached as she looked at her mother's peaceful face, but there was no time to dwell. She knew she couldn't risk her mom getting caught in the crossfire. Thea grabbed her backpack, slung the bow over her shoulder, and took one last look around the house before stepping out into the cool night air. She hurried through the quiet streets of Red Ridge, making her way toward the canyons. The desert air was eerily still, as if holding its breath in anticipation of what was coming. Her footsteps echoed against the rocks as she climbed to the highest point she could find, a rocky outcrop overlooking the entire town. Then, she waited. The silence stretched on, but her instincts screamed that something was coming. And then she saw them, strange, flickering lights on the horizon, too low and too fast to be planes. They grew larger, closer, until Thea could make out the sleek, metallic forms of 3 Nyrax scout ships descending toward Red Ridge. The ships landed in the outskirts of town, their sleek, black forms shimmering under the moonlight. Nyrax soldiers emerged, clad in dark, smoke-like armor that seemed to absorb the light around them. Their eyes glowed a sinister red as they began to spread out, scanning the area. Thea took a deep breath, gripping the bow tightly. All right, mentor. What's the plan? Focus on isolating individual soldiers. Engage quickly and avoid direct confrontation with multiple opponents. Thea steadied herself, knocking an energy arrow and narrowing her eyes on the nearest soldier. She pulled back the bowstring, feeling the familiar surge of power, and released. The arrow streaked through the night, hitting the Nyrax soldier squarely in the chest. It exploded in a burst of green light, and the soldier disintegrated into ashes. But the commotion alerted the others. A squad of Nyrax soldiers turned in her direction, their eyes locking onto her position. "Looks like I've got their attention," Thea muttered, adrenaline flooding her veins. The Nyrax soldiers advanced, moving in eerie unison. Thea fired another arrow, but one of the soldiers raised a metallic arm, generating a shield that deflected the shot. They were learning her tactics. "Mentor, I need more power," she shouted, firing rapidly to hold them at bay. "Draw upon your intent. The bow responds to your will." Thea took a deep breath, centering herself. She thought of her mom, of her friends, of the people in Red Ridge who had no idea the danger they were in. She thought of her responsibility, the weight of the bow in her hands, and the promise she had made to protect them. She felt a surge of energy unlike anything before. Green light pulsed along the bow, and when she pulled back the string, a massive arrow formed larger, brighter, and pulsing with raw energy. With a determined cry, she released the arrow. It arced through the air, splitting into a dozen smaller arrows that rained down on the advancing Nyrax soldiers, each one finding its mark. The soldiers disintegrated in a cascade of green light, leaving nothing but ashes. But her victory was short-lived. The Nyrax commander appeared, towering over the soldiers, his armor glinting with dark, iridescent energy. His face was obscured by a helmet with a single red slit for an eye, which focused on her with lethal intent. "You are unworthy of the Eldarii bow, human," the commander sneered, his voice distorted and cold. "That weapon belongs to the Dominion. Come and take it, then." Thea shouted, raising the bow. The commander charged, moving with blinding speed. Thea barely had time to fire an arrow before he was upon her. He deflected it effortlessly, swinging a massive blade that forced her to dodge and roll. Her mind raced as she scrambled to regain her footing. She couldn't defeat him with brute force alone, she needed to outsmart him. Remembering her training, Thea visualized multiple arrows and focused on the commander's weak points. As he charged again, she fired in rapid succession, aiming for his joints and exposed areas in his armor. One arrow struck his leg, forcing him to stumble, and another hit his arm, making him drop his blade. The commander roared in fury, his red eye blazing. He raised his arm, and a surge of dark energy crackled toward her. She raised the bow, forming an energy shield just in time to deflect the attack. But the force was overwhelming, and she felt herself sliding backward, her boots scraping against the rocky ground. "Your struggle is pointless, human," the commander taunted, advancing once more. Thea gritted her teeth, channeling every ounce of strength into the shield. "I'm not just some human," she spat back. "I'm the bearer of the Eldarii bow, and you're not getting it." With a final burst of energy, she lowered the shield and fired a single, powerful arrow straight into the commander's chest. It pierced his armor, and he froze, a look of shock flashing across his face before he disintegrated into a swirl of dark smoke and ash. Silence settled over the canyon as the last of the Nyrax forces vanished. Breathing heavily, Thea lowered the bow, her entire body trembling with exhaustion and relief. She had done it. She had defended her town, protected the bow, and faced down the Nyrax. Trial complete, the mentor's voice intoned, a note of pride in its normally detached tone. "Your courage and skill have proven your worth." Thea sank to her knees, looking out over the quiet town below. The dawn was breaking, casting warm light over the desert landscape. She knew the Nyrax would return someday, stronger and more determined than ever. But as she watched the sunrise, she felt a calm determination settle over her. She was no longer just a girl from Red Ridge. She was a protector. and she was ready for whatever challenges awaited her. Thea's nights were no longer filled with peaceful stargazing or quiet solitude. Since her first encounter with the Nyrax Dominion, she'd transformed the old barn into her base of operations. She fortified it, training every night with the Eldarii bow until she could wield it as naturally as she breathed. The mentor's guidance was unwavering, urging her to push harder, to become faster and more precise. Each night, the bow responded to her will with increasing power and versatility. But the Nyrax's relentless pursuit of the bow meant her skills were constantly tested. Their scouts appeared more frequently, their numbers growing, their tactics sharper. Yet Thea managed to defend Red Ridge, evading detection by the townspeople, who remained blissfully unaware of the nightly skirmishes waged to keep them safe. One evening, as Thea practiced creating defensive shields, the mentor's voice interrupted her training. Warning, Nyrax Dominion ship detected. Estimated time of arrival, 30 minutes. This ship is larger and heavily armed. Nyrax troops are led by Commander Ralzesh. Thea's heart raced. She remembered the tales from her training, the legend of Commander Ralzesh, a brutal Nyrax general whose sole purpose was to capture the Eldarii bow for the Dominion. He was ruthless, his skill unmatched, and his forces were known for leaving devastation in their wake. "This is it," she muttered, tightening her grip on the bow. "Correct. This is the Nyrax's final attempt to reclaim the Eldarii weapon. They will use all means at their disposal." She took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "I'm not going to let them take it, Mentor. I'm ready." But even as she said it, she could feel a hint of doubt creeping into her thoughts. Ralzesh was different from the soldiers she'd faced. This would be a test not only of her skill, but of her strength, her resolve, and her ability to protect the town she loved. She bolted down the dusty road that led to the highest overlook in Red Ridge, her bow in hand. If she could see the ship's arrival, she might have a chance to launch an attack before they could mobilize. She reached the ridge just as the sky began to darken. The looming silhouette of the Nyrax ship, a massive, obsidian fortress, descended over the town, casting an ominous shadow over the desert. The ship landed on the outskirts, and Thea watched as Nyrax soldiers poured out, assembling in formation. They moved with cold precision, their armor gleaming under the fading light. At the forefront of the troops stood Commander Ralzesh, a towering figure in dark, menacing armor. His helmet bore a single, glowing red slit for an eye, and the metallic spikes along his shoulders glinted like the fangs of a predator. Thea's heart pounded. She pulled back her bowstring, summoning an energy arrow and letting it fly. The green bolt streaked through the air, a flash of light in the twilight, and struck a Nyrax soldier at the edge of the formation, disintegrating him instantly. Ralzesh raised a hand, and the soldiers froze, their gaze turning toward Thea's position. "She's here," he snarled, his voice deep and distorted. "Seize the bow, and show no mercy." The Nyrax soldiers sprang into action, charging up the ridge. Thea fired arrow after arrow, her strikes precise, her energy unwavering. Each arrow found its target, but for every soldier she felled, 2 more took their place. As they advanced, she sensed Ralzesh watching her, studying her movements. His presence was a dark force, radiating a malevolent energy that made her skin crawl. "Thea," the mentor's voice cut in, "you must isolate Ralzesh. His forces are merely a distraction." "But how am I supposed to get to him? I'm outnumbered 10-1. Remember your training. The bow responds to your intent and will adapt as necessary. Focus on your goal, and the path will become clear." Thea took a deep breath, centering herself amid the chaos. She visualized her objective, reaching Ralzesh, confronting him directly. She closed her eyes, felt the bow pulse in her hands, and let that focus fill her. When she opened her eyes, the bow glowed with a new intensity. She drew back the string, summoning not 1 but 3 energy arrows, each one charged and pulsing with vibrant green light. With a shout, she released them, watching as the arrows spread out, homing in on multiple targets at once. The arrows struck true, creating a path through the soldiers. The Nyrax troops faltered, and Thea seized the moment, sprinting forward, weaving between the remaining soldiers as she closed the distance between herself and Ralzesh. As she reached him, Ralzesh turned, his single red eye locking onto her. "You're just a child," he sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "You think you can wield the Eldarii bow, a weapon meant for warriors?" Thea lifted the bow, meeting his gaze with steady determination. "I may be a kid, but I'm stronger than you think." Ralzesh's laughter echoed across the canyon. "I will enjoy taking that bow from your lifeless hands." He raised his weapon, a massive, double-edged blade that crackled with dark energy. With a roar, he lunged at her, swinging the blade in a deadly arc. Thea leapt back, her instincts honed from countless hours of training. She fired an arrow at him, but he deflected it effortlessly, his armor absorbing the impact. Ralzesh charged again, his strikes faster, more brutal. Thea dodged and rolled, each movement more precise than the last, her bow an extension of her body. She fired a rapid succession of arrows, aiming for his joints and weak points, but his armor deflected each shot. "You cannot defeat me," he taunted, his blade flashing as he advanced. "The Eldarii bow belongs to the Dominion. Surrender it, and I may spare your life." "Not a chance," she growled, drawing back the bowstring. Ralzesh swung his blade with a thunderous force, and Thea barely managed to block it with an energy shield. The impact sent her skidding backward, her arms shaking from the force. "Thea," the mentor urged, "you must concentrate. Recall your training and focus your intent. Only by channeling your full power can you prevail." Gritting her teeth, Thea closed her eyes, reaching deep within herself. She thought of the people she was protecting, the friends, family, and town she loved. She thought of her mom, the life she had known, and the quiet strength she'd found within herself since discovering the bow. When she opened her eyes, she felt a surge of clarity. The bow pulsed in her hands, responding to her resolve, and she realized that her power didn't come from strength alone, it came from her heart, from her willingness to protect. As Ralzesh charged again, she raised the bow and drew back the string. This time, an enormous arrow materialized, crackling with raw energy, brighter and more powerful than anything she had summoned before. Ralzesh's red eye flickered with uncertainty. "What are you doing?" Thea smiled, her voice steady and unwavering. "I'm ending this." She released the arrow, and it streaked toward him, its power growing as it traveled. Ralzesh raised his blade to block, but the arrow shattered it on impact, piercing through his armor and striking him square in the chest. A blinding flash of light filled the canyon as Ralzesh let out a final, anguished scream. His body disintegrated into a cloud of dark energy that dissipated into the night. Silence fell over the battlefield. The remaining Nyrax soldiers, leaderless and defeated, scattered into the shadows, retreating into the desert. Thea lowered the bow, her breathing heavy but her spirit triumphant. She had done it. She had protected her town, driven back the Nyrax, and proven herself as the bearer of the Eldarii bow. As dawn began to break over the horizon, the mentor's voice spoke once more, its tone filled with respect. "You have proven yourself worthy, Thea Holloway. The Eldarii would be proud." She smiled, the exhaustion fading into a sense of quiet pride. "Thank you, mentor. I couldn't have done it without you. The bow is yours to wield, and the galaxy knows of your courage. But remember, there will always be those who seek its power." Thea nodded, understanding the weight of that responsibility. "I'll be ready for them." As she walked back toward town, the first rays of sunlight bathed Red Ridge in a warm, golden glow. The town was safe, and she knew that, whatever came next, she was ready. For Thea was no longer just a 14-year-old girl from Red Ridge. She was the bearer of the Eldarii bow, protector of her world and perhaps, someday, many others. And as long as she held that bow, she knew she would stand between the galaxy and the forces of darkness, ready to defend it at all costs.